Hey, hello, good afternoon. It's TK and Arif, humble associates, and welcome to Agile 101.
Welcome, hello. And my cat has decided to join me at the same time.
It's-
So sorry for that.
they usually
But
do. They usually
they
do.
usually-
Hopefully,
we're live.
everyone's doing absolutely fantastic. Hello, Samak. Let us know who you are and where you're coming from.
Yes,
We're here
please.
with Arif's cats. I'm here in the mountains. Arif's with the cats. So that's so lovely. Thank you so much for joining in such wild and wonderful numbers because today we will be talking about deadlines.
That's right.
Isn't
Yes,
that
we're going to be
exciting?
very, very exciting. I'm sure for many of you who are faced with trying to deal with the work or finish work with deadlines looming or deadlines being
Mm.
set, and then you're trying to wonder how does this work in an agile world? It doesn't make sense. So let's try and demystify some of it. Let's try and
Yeah,
make
and and
things
and
a
yet
bit
it has to work
easier.
because if we are to work in an agile way, something has to be there in order to manage. So um, thank you so much for everyone introducing themselves. I've got another challenge for you in terms of being able to say something on the chat. So I've got a task for you, which is called a chat storm. And the basic thing is, I wanted to ask you about what is it that deadlines are useful for? So, what do we need deadlines for? So let us
Yes.
know, why do you think deadlines are there for? Because they exist. I guess there's a reason for deadlines. So Arif,
Yes.
what do you think before we get our answers?
Well, are we going to ask people to type it in the chat? Is that what we're
Yes, we
doing,
do.
or
Yes,
not?
we do. Send
We,
us a
we,
message.
yes, put
Yeah.
it in the chat. Put it in the chat. Let's type it. And an amazing array of locations you're
Oh yeah. Well, there's
dialing in.
quite
Thank you.
all over the
Um,
world, which we love.
exactly. So as you put your comments in, my thoughts on why deadlines exist. Well, I wonder if there's something around control. So people who organize work or set work or define work for teams tend to want to have some degree of control over that work, and that it causes, unfortunately, or fortunately, causes these this kind of anxiety or this kind of like, it must be done. We need it done by this particular time for various reasons. And there's
Mhm.
probably good reasons for that, but there are knock-on effects and side effects as a result of that kind of dynamic. And so, yeah, I think there is a desire for control can cause. Sorry about that. Can cause some of this like kind of discussion happening about why we need a deadline, because one party wants to feel like it's going to happen and there's some certainty. That's my view as to
I
a
like what,
reason.
yeah, and I like what some of you said. Like Robert said that deadlines are here there to focus attention. They definitely do focus attention, but maybe there are some better ways to stick on track of to meet requirements, to move project forward. Um, then again, is it the only way to move it forward? Maybe a logical closure. I guess you'll close when it's done, but not necessarily when the deadline happens. The deadline is just a matter of time. So there's various explanations. I think to agree with some of you, deadlines are used quite a lot to increase pressure and manage
Mm,
expectations,
yeah,
which I
yeah,
think is quite an important thing, Arif, because we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to talk about why is it important to manage expectations in maybe different ways than just deadlines. So
yeah,
I think what we wanted to talk about is what are the techniques for managing expectations and why they are important. So why do we
yeah.
need these techniques, Arif?
Well, because I think a lot of you probably are working in non-technology settings, maybe applying agility in not saying weird and wonderful, but very different circumstances, very different environments to where agile originates from. So I think it's important that you have a toolbox, you have some different approaches to help you,
Hmm.
because ultimately. depending on the context you're in, some may be useful, some might not be. So let's. I think it's important we share some of our some of these different ideas, and you may get inspired by them and think of something entirely different, and that's fine too. But ultimately, yeah, as TK said, it's about managing expectations, because while deadlines, as we've gone through, are normal practice in some environments, in some organizations, it can cause a bit of a challenge when you're working in a, in an agile way, where for instance you may be trying to deliver work on an iterative basis, where you want to get something done on some kind of cadence, right? So there may be some challenges. So how do we manage that expectation so that there isn't that kind of frustration
Mm.
on the part of those people who think something should happen, and then the people doing the work are trying to demonstrate why it may need to take longer, or it's going to take however long it may need to take, etc., etc.
Absolutely, and in the comments I can see Teresa actually saying that deadlines are there to make AD&D people actually do anything, um, which is an interesting observation. We love neurodiverse people, and we work with quite a few ourselves, and I think there's better ways. And I do hope that through this wonderful live show you'll actually see some. So the first thing we wanted to talk about is breaking work down. Um, so how is this an agile way, Arif, and how do you do that, and how does it help?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, if we go back to the start and we talked about this idea of control, or this anxiety of knowing when something will happen, and I suppose when the stakes are high, and the importance of the work is quite high, then the anxiety on the people wanting the work to be done increases, or the kind of I suppose desire to want to see it being done also increases. And as time goes on, it's like there's some kind of curve or graph where
Mm,
anxiety increases over time as work gets done. It's like, okay, the longer it's taking, I don't know when it's going to get, So I think part of the challenge, or not say challenge, sorry, part of the agile way of working that can really help with that is the idea of doing small pieces of work and then reviewing and reflecting on a more regular basis. So if we break the work down into smaller pieces,
mm,
then I think there's a few side effects or few benefits that we can gain from that. So number one is you are able to know how difficult, challenging, complex the work is. You'll be able to know that far quicker than if you aren't able to break the work down. Secondly, if you do that, then you'll also get an opportunity to then do course correction. So if you start breaking the work down, you're realizing it's more complicated than it was originally, or you think actually there are missing pieces of information that are going to stop you from doing the work, whatever those things are, more risks that get
mm.
identified, then you're able to start having conversations with the right people sooner rather than later. So it's just a really quick, easy win, or quick, easy approach for us to then understand how complex this work is, what is it going to take, and actually realistically what will it take for me to get it done. And so by breaking it down, I'm able to achieve those benefits. Plus, also from a transparency point of view, it's great, because once you break work down, then
Mm.
people who are looking or observing from the outside, or who are interested in the results of what you're doing as a team, they'll be able to get quick insight as well. So, oh, okay, I now understand. Okay, this is all the work that is actually needed. We thought it was this, but actually it's all of these smaller pieces. So now that we understand all of that, okay, I feel a bit less anxious, or I feel my desire for control, it may reduce a little bit, because
Yeah.
I have more information at hand. I can make decisions now, right? So okay, now I know this information. I may say, okay, actually, I don't want this, or I think we can park this bit, we can prioritize this bit, whatever the decision making is.
That's a very good point, Arif. And I think we should watch out, however, for using the breaking of the work down as a way of increasing control. Because
Of
the
course.
problem is, if we do increase control too much, we're just showing a lack of trust to the people we're
Yeah,
working with. And
yeah,
that actually goes both ways. So if we don't trust the people we work with, they don't trust us and always expect some form of treachery. And if you build your relationship based on the lack of trust, well, no great things will ever happen. So that's the thing. But there's another thing that's being enabled by not the lack of trust, but breaking work down, which is actually short feedback loops. So, what short feedback loops enable is for you to be able to quickly inspect and adapt and quickly see where you will be, not necessarily at your deadline, but what's your progress? What is it that you can forecast to happen? And we'll talk about it possibly in the next Agile 101. But there's so many benefits of having short feedback loops. So, Arif, why do you think it's one of the major tools for us?
Well, I think like we said earlier, or like I was kind of alluding to earlier on, which is it's about the quicker we get the feedback. Well, okay, let's start roll it back a little bit more, which is okay. We're breaking the work down into smaller pieces of work. Okay, so smaller tasks or whatever it may be. If we know that we now then have a checkpoint or a point at which we get feedback on that work, the shorter the time gap between us starting something, us doing something, and us getting that feedback, the faster we can then make decisions on what we want to do next. That's the reality. So a shorter feedback loop
Mm,
means quicker opportunity to get feedback, quicker opportunity to then decide what you want to do differently as a result of that feedback, and
yeah.
also means we can then plan something else if we've decided that the work we were thinking of doing is no longer fit for purpose. So
That is
whether
very
you're,
important. Yeah.
a marketing team, for instance, who are trying to plan in some campaign, you know, don't plan the whole campaign for 3 months before going live. So see if you can break that down into constituent parts. For instance, maybe you want to take that campaign, break it down into maybe the social media element separately, the website element separately. You might want to experiment with different things first. So maybe do the social media element first, break that into the smallest piece down, do the website element as well, break that into the smallest piece down. Maybe it's like one advert you want to get out or one social media post you want to get out, get that done, produce the work, get a feedback review on that, and then go live and see what happens, and then use the data to then determine how well that's performing before you do any more major work on it. So things like that, I think, are ways that we can get around managing those deadlines, because or managing the
Mm.
expectations around deadlines, because the quicker we get the feedback, the more transparent it is.
And absolutely, and I think this is one of the core tenets of agility. People talk about posters, Jiras, and user stories, and other, software or not aspects, but this particular thing that Arif just spoke about is the essence of agility, and we're talking about it quite a lot on our sessions. So yeah, Nahendra actually had a very good comment that deadlines may lead to a toxic work environment, essentially, and you can overdo that. There's a famous example. Dave Sinclair from Sinclair Computers. As you may remember, I don't know if I'm so old. I do remember ZX Spectrum. Or if you probably do remember the Specky too, even in the attic. But the thing about it was, Dave, what he did is he always published a deadline in the papers, making a commitment for the entire company and for the engineers, and they never could make it on time. And he was always late with delivering stuff that early on. But he sincerely believed in managing with deadlines. Sadly, his company is not with us anymore. Yeah, I think it was Eric Live Sinclair, actually, not Dave, but yeah, it's just me. But in terms of feedback loops and in terms of being using them, there's something else that's really important, because you have to communicate very clearly. So what you have to have is clear goals and honest conversations. Because the thing about it all is, if you don't have deadlines, honestly talking about the expectations and goals is nearly the only thing that will actually level with the people you work with. If you're not using artificial sandbags like deadline to show that your lack of trust, you have to establish trust through other ways, and you have to say, look, I do trust you, but the expectation is you will deliver. So we need to set goals. And they are quite important, even though they are not always mentioned as a fundamental tenet of agility, I think, Arif. And, this is quite interesting, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it goes back to the question of, so one thing we notice a lot with teams, and again, it's irrespective of the environment you're in, and especially those in a non-tech space. Um, a lot of the times work is handed down to teams, but there is a it can be opaque as to the reason behind the work, or a reason behind
Mm,
a project being set, or some output being needed, for instance, right? So what we find is the outcome or goal as to why the work needs to be delivered typically isn't communicated very well. um, and so we have this challenge where teams are asked to then deliver or execute, but they aren't really clear on why they need to do what they need to do. Um, that creates a gap in terms of then how work gets done.
mm,
And because that information isn't very clearly understood or agreed or discussed on the outset, there's miscommunication that can occur, or the chances of miscommunication, sorry, I should say, increase. Quality or the approach that a team may take in delivering the work also changes. So there's lots of issues with that. So what we argue for, and it goes back to one of those agile principles around, um, this idea of a self-organizing team, is that the team must have some input or some say in
yeah,
terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
why they're doing the work they're doing. And if they do that, then that means they can create the goals with those in leadership positions, for instance, as to the why they're doing the work, what benefit they're trying to achieve, what goal they're trying to achieve. That way, they then have a greater say in terms of the how the work gets executed, or they're able to determine that for themselves. So, if they are previously told, right, we want you to do this work, and it needs to be done on this deadline, for the because, well, maybe sometimes there isn't a because, but it needs to be done by this deadline, right? Okay,
Yeah.
fine, we'll do it because you've told us, we've understood, unclear, right? We'll do the work, whatever. But if now I say to you, but we want to achieve this goal, and this is when we'd like to achieve it by, okay, how would we do the work? Then the team has some say in how they achieve that
There you
goal.
go. Yeah.
And then there's a conversation that can be, okay, well, there's three options. We could take this option, this option, or this option. There's pros and cons to all of them. Let's decide as a group which one is the right approach, and together with leadership make that right call. And then the team might have a more, I suppose, what's the word I'm looking for? Not only have a
Agency.
say,
Yeah.
agency, yeah, agency. Thank you, Tika. They have a great agency in how the work gets delivered, and I think you get better quality outputs as a result. There's more clarity from the team as to why they're doing the work they're doing. They feel more invested in that effort, and that I'm sure more likely to produce a better quality result at the end. So
And as Shade
lots of
said in
reasons.
the comments, it also increases trust. So this
Increases
is
trust.
this
Big goal.
reinforcing great
Yeah,
loop that can really
yeah,
help, right? So we have
yeah.
some great comments, which is totally amazing. A lot of people actually are talking about why deadlines are important, which is good too, and a lot of people are responding to what we're doing. But we have an example of how you can actually set goals in and I think quite a nice way. So what we tend to see is building goals as a form of a tree. So people understand where goals come from, what's the impact, how can you actually see that, and Arif can possibly talk a bit more about it. I'll show the screen share over here.
Okay, so are we on the OKR slide, or
The
which one are
impact
we on? Oh, no,
metrics of goals,
impact
yeah.
metrics. Okay, yeah, sorry. So the right. So this is a technique that comes from Jeff Gotthealth. So credit to him. He came up with this model. But I think it's a really clever and simple approach in terms of how you might set goals and measures, and then give teams the ability or capability then to determine how they want to achieve them. So then we move a bit further away from project deadline, so to speak, but more looking at achieving results. Because from an agility point of view, we're then able to move the conversation into in a different plane, I think, because then teams, as Shade said, are more trusted. They are then able to target business results. They have the choice as to how they achieve them, as long as the metrics are being achieved, or at least there's evidence that the team are trying to achieve those metrics, right? And I think that's more impactful from a business point of view as well, because surely if I'm a business owner, I'm seeing the results being hit. That's far more important to me than the deadlines being met. Now, yes, both could work, both may be required at certain times, but ultimately as a business, I'm going to be judged by the metrics, not by the deadlines. It's as simple as that. So with this model, it's just a very broad but also detailed view, where you've got at the top level those typical business metrics, right, that any business is going to be judged by. They may differ in slightly. The numbers are obviously going to be wildly different depending on the organization you're in. But the critical thing is, excuse me, with the team, it's about then deciding. And in this example, it's a very obvious B2B digital scenario, where there's a team, or maybe a set of teams potentially, who are involved in or responsible for meeting certain business metrics based on the in performance of the B2B digital product, or B2C digital product, I should say, that they're selling. Where you can see here things are different measures around putting items in carts and purchases and annual membership renewals, etc., etc. So the point, however, is that you look at that top level within blue. You're then looking at the next layer below that, which is what outcomes do we think from our business? What measurement outcomes do we think in our business will actually directly affect those top line business metrics? So in this case, we've got revenue, profit margin at the top. Those are the top line. Immediately below that, they have determined that things around customer adding items into their shopping cart, a measurement of that, and how many times customers renew their annual membership will have a direct impact in terms of revenue. On the other side, when it comes to profit margin, they've determined that customer referrals, number of times customers creating new accounts, and the number of times customers then putting items in, referred customers putting the items into a shopping cart, will have a direct impact to their profit margin. I'm not here to debate whether these are good, or sorry, accurate, or they are definitely going to impact it. I'm just illustrating it through Jeff's example as to how they've done the thinking and how you can use a tree like this. And so as you go down, you'll see the detail of those measures gets more detailed, right? You'll see that. But ultimately, from a team point of view, ownership point of view, trust point of view, ownership point of view, there are going to be one or more teams who are responsible for certain branches of these trees. So there could be a team who's responsible for that whole logging in, looking at the product page, putting the customer in putting the cart, an item in the cart. Could be another team who are looking at that annual membership process. Could be another team looking at the referred customer process or customer referral process. It doesn't matter. Point is, these teams have been given agency, where it's like, okay, you need to hit these metrics. These are really important for us as a business. We want to see some change. We want to see some improvement. We're giving you the capability to now target that. We are going to monitor the performance. We'll be here to obviously direct at times, or manage at times, or advise at times, whatever it might be that the management need to do or leadership need to do. But ultimately, you as a team are going to be responsible. So this is a very mature, I suppose, example, but it gives you a window, an insight into what's possible when we move away from, okay, strictly thinking about deadlines, moving to a world where looking at the outcome, the impact, and ownership of that as
Mm.
well. Now, again, going back to some other non-tech examples, if you're, I mentioned marketing, so I'll stick with marketing. Maybe there's plenty of marketing metrics, perhaps that you are being asked, or you may think about. Maybe you want to be asked to focus on. Excuse me. There may be brand loyalty type metrics that you use in marketing. There may be views that you're looking at, number of views on your social media, number of referrals from your social media posts, things like that. These all may be types of marketing metrics that you might want to think about that will have an impact on those top line measures. And then it's a case of having that conversation with your managers, your leadership, saying, look, give us the responsibility and let us control what we do, and so we can determine how we do it. Or if you're in the finance team, maybe there's some other finance related measurements that you want to own for yourselves, around cost, performance, whatever it might be. And again, you might say, look, we want to measure that, we want to own that, we will use a tree, something like this. We'll decide with you what those outcomes
Mm.
are. And based on the work we're doing, we hope to affect those measurements.
But also, what you might have seen before is OKRs. So I'm sure that many of you have heard about OKRs. Give us a thumbs up on LinkedIn over here if you have, so you can put a thumbs up reaction. Oh, quite a few of you. All right. So OKRs are another framework, quite complementary to what Arif described, very popular nowadays to manage high level and lower level goals. Now, they go hand in hand with agility if you want to. This might be a topic for one of our next agile ones, but definitely something that you might want to look at. So Arif, what is it that you personally like about OKRs?
I mean, they've been around for a while now, since the 90s.
Yeah,
And it's been
true.
made famous by a chap named John Doerr. I can't pronounce his name correctly. I'm very sorry, John, if I pronounce your name incorrectly. Somehow he watches this.
Better than Clive
But
Sinclair, yes.
yeah, exactly. So, but what I like. We haven't got many minutes left, but very quickly, this is, if I go back to the tree example that we showed you, I think, to me, and Jeff's model that I was explaining there, I think, to me, the OKR is just another way of approaching that same model, where you're talking about what are the ultimate outcomes that I want to achieve. What key results, i.e., what actual measures, or what actual things, outcomes will I be achieving, or things will I be doing to achieve that particular outcome. Um, Give autonomy to a team for a quarter to see whether or not they can achieve it. Review at the end of the quarter what happened, and then there's an iterative approach to it. So
Mm,
it fits very well with the
mm,
agile way of working, because the whole concept with the OKR is the team is autonomous in deciding what the OKRs are. You, as a leadership, might define the objective at the top level,
mm,
but the KRs come from the team. And putting those two together, it's a cyclical approach, or every quarter we review together what's going on. Are the key results that we think that we want to target for a quarter, did they achieve what they said they were going to achieve when it comes to that objective that the leadership set? Did they not? What do we need to do differently for the next quarter? And you go around that cycle again. So it's a very cyclical approach. Every quarter, you're looking at how we can impact or affect the overall top line business metrics, or objectives in this case. It ties very well into agile ways of working. It's very much about the outcome, why we're doing what we're doing, and how do we impact the business metrics. But also, it's also the other thing for me is it's based on this idea of trust, autonomy, and the team having a say in what they're doing.
And it's actually one of the reasons I really like it too, because these goals are typically not top down, which I love. But again, everything we've discussed here isn't easy to implement. Nothing really is.
No.
But the essence of agility is that you, at first, you try, and then you get better over time as you iterate. Right? These short feedback loops are also for your agile way of work. But if you want to know if you are ready to make the plunge, we have something special for you, and Arif is probably preparing to paste it. We have actually developed a tool called the Agile Scorecard, and you should have it in the chat in a moment. And what you do is, if you'd be willing, if you'd like to go and see how it works, you go to Humble Associates /scorecard, and in there you will be able to see how you're ready to start your agile journey and what is it that you can actually do if there's some areas that you still have some work to do in to be able to fully utilize agility, and what is it that are the areas that you might want to have some help in if you do. So feel free to use the tool. We had some great feedback from a lot of people, so yeah, so feel free to copy and paste, and also go Humble Associates /scorecard. It seems like it's you can't click the link in the chat. Well, that's our test, Arif. We were supposed to just test it. But then again, I'm sure you can figure it out. Arif even pasted it 3 times, so I'm sure you can find it.
Yeah.
But
have a go. Copy and paste that into
copy
your
and paste
browser
it,
and have a
and
go
if
at
you
that.
can't, just go humble.associates /scorecard. You'll be able to see it. There's one more thing. If you haven't had enough of us after 31 minutes, and we should end soon, there is the Humble Breakfast Jam tomorrow. So, Arif, what is this
Yes.
about?
Well, it's our weekly audio
Arif,
event.
you got muted, sadly.
Okay.
But I'll be able to follow up with that, which is the Humble Breakfast Jam is an audio meeting to talk with us about stuff like this. So we have it every Friday at 10 a.m. and it's just a loose conversation about what's happening in the world and how it impacts the world of agility and change. So if you're interested, come by 10 a.m. Every Friday, humble.associates/jam, and we'll be able to see you there. And hopefully, Arif will regain his voice by then. So, with all this being said, thank you so much for joining. And we hopefully will see you in the next Agile 101, which is happening soon. So,
thank you, everyone.
See you soon.
Take care.
And bye-bye.